Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. Thank you for inviting me in this discussion. Now, my position is the franchise of ABS-CBN is a law. And that law describes the privileges, the businesses, the activities, and the powers that the franchisee can exercise. And that law also circumscribes or establishes the limiting date when the privilege can be exercised by the grantee. In the case of ABS-CBN, the law says your privilege to engage in the business of mass media broadcasting will end on May 4, 2020, period. It cannot go beyond that, and everything must stop. Congress must exercise the power of legislation either to terminate it really as it has been terminated by the law itself or extend it. No other power in our government has the right to extend it a minute or a second. The law must be obeyed, the Constitution must be enforced against anybody in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Now, as far as provisional authority being given, I have my own doubts whether Congress can do that. Because if you read the Constitution, there is a 50-year limitation on the period of franchises. If you grant an extension, how are you going to treat that extension with respect to the period established by the Constitution with regard to the length of any franchise here? In fact, ABS-CBN has been the oldest broadcast medium in the country. It started with Alto Broadcasting Station, which was given to Tony Quirino during the time of President Quirino. Then it was taken over by the Lopezes. And the Lopezes had the Chronicle Broadcasting Network. That is why you have ABS-CBN. More than these things, these three stations have been more than 50 years. They've been extended now and then. Now it expired again, and it's being extended. It's up to Congress to extend it or not, and that is why we are in this very complex situation. And it is complicated by the fact that there is a pending case in the Supreme Court, which I think must be considered by Congress in acting on this, because although we have the principle of separation of powers between the three departments of government, the Constitution also requires that they must be coordinated so that they will not clash. And I think it's a matter of respect for the Supreme Court, for Congress to recognize that there's a pending case which must be decided first, because if the Supreme Court will decide the case before it adversely to ABS-CBN, what will happen to the legislative action of Congress granting a new franchise to ABS-CBN? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Juan Ponce Enrile. Senator, you mentioned earlier that you have doubts on this provisional franchise. Can you elaborate further on those doubts?
There must be a certain degree of permanence of any legislative action. It cannot be ad hoc. You are not a delegated power like NTC that you can exercise quasi-judicial power or quasi-legislative power through rule-making power that Congress delegates to you. Congress must enact a law, and that law must be complete in every respect. if you can grant, if Congress can grant a temporary franchise, what is the impelling or compelling reason for Congress not to grant a permanent with franchise with a reasonable period of 25 years?
Mr. Chairman.
Why don't you, if you think that there is a national emergency, why don't you ask President Duterte to certify the bill so that you can shorten the period of deliberations?